computer. All right. Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. We're going to be talking about plagiarism and AI. What does that look like? And some insights into how you can navigate your academic journey with us while being mindful of these things. So I'm going to share my screen. Give me 1 second. Okay. Can you all see presentation? Okay. Awesome. All right, so let's get started. This may take about 45 minutes or so just to go over certain aspects. First, the main part will be plagiarism, and then I'll get into AI and the connection between the two. How do we kind of figure out what works, what doesn't work in academia? All right, you may see me do my little mouse here and there, so. Um, as I said, we're going to talk first about the plagiarism part. So I want to begin with breaking down. I always start from the basics and then we'll go into the more complex parts of our topic for today. I wanted to use this definition. We'll start there. I think we're all on the same page about what does plagiarism mean. It's a pretty straightforward concept, but just to still have it so it doesn't hurt. This is from our university directly. There's a document that we have that kind of breaks these things down a little bit, but not in extreme detail. But I think this definition is straightforward, simple, but it does really encompass what this means. So, plagiarism, the use of somebody else's ideas, words, or work without giving credit to the source. So, who that came from, where that came from, could be an organization or a person. That's the gist of plagiarism, right? So, most of us, we're on the same page about that part. I also want to share, as we now transition into why does this matter? Why does a topic area of plagiarism matter? And then on top of that, AI and those two things connected. As I was preparing for this and kind of reading around some articles and other documents and stuff, there's one by Harvard University that I thought was really good. They talked about plagiarism. There's one specific quote here that I really liked. Very succinct. I like when complex things can be broken down into something that's easy to digest. So they talked about this. I'm going to start here and then I'll frame a little bit more of why does this matter. So academic writing is what they said. I took it directly from them. Academic writing is essentially an ongoing conversation among scholars. Really simple, straightforward. They're getting at with this quote, and it'll make more sense on the next slide. When you think about yourself as a student here at Loyola and beyond, if you choose to go to graduate school or anything like that, or you choose to teach one day as well, you are a scholar. You're considered a scholar. And this is at the undergraduate level. This is also at the graduate level, at both of them. And then, of course, the other side in terms of faculty and people like that. So, academic writing itself and research and learning and all of those things, when you think about it from a big picture perspective, it's essentially an ongoing conversation. It doesn't end. Different topic areas, different maybe levels of importance with, things that we look at and questions that we ask and the answers that we get. But it's an ongoing conversation among scholars from all over the world. That's, in a big picture sense, academia, right? No matter what school you go to. So now, I hope this thing isn't in the way. If that gets in the way, please let me know so I can figure out how to move that. But I put the quotes back up here. So now in terms of talking about why does it matter, I want to keep this in our frame of reference about the conversation among scholars, right? Why does this matter? Why is it important to me? The first thing I want to point out is your commitment as a student. So, as I briefly mentioned earlier, when you became a student here at Loyola, you entered into that scholar community, right? And of course, if you've had prior educational experience, same thing. Um, but our focus is the right here, right now. You're enrolled here. You entered into that community of scholars, right? So now you are considered one. It doesn't mean you have to have already written a bunch of papers or done presentations and all that kind of stuff. Just you entering in makes you a scholar and the work that you do along the way as you're in school, right? So that's number one. That's your commitment. You became an active member when you decided to enter school. Number two is your responsibility as a scholar. So now that you're a member of this community where people are teaching you, one day you also get to help others in the same light. Your responsibility as you navigate that journey is to use your resources to conduct your work, of course, but to make sure that you're giving credit to the people that you're learning from, reading, watching videos, and all that kind of stuff, right? When you're using those resources, it's an ethical responsibility to credit those people that it came from, right? As a member of this society. The people that you're taking it from, they're also a member of the scholar community as well, right? We all work together, we all help each other. The third thing to think about when you're trying to just imagine of the importance of all of this, expectations. And this is more so, I put there as in professor expectations. So your professors working with you as students, no matter what class, what major you're in, what is it that you're working on inside of your courses, your professors expect you as a student to conduct your own research, your own writing, presentations, and all of that. It's showing your critical thinking in some kind of capacity, right? They expect you to do that on your own as a student because they want you to learn. They're here to guide your learning and to help you along the way, but that is our one of the primary focus areas for you being a student. We want you to learn. We want you to think about what is it that you're approaching and reading, bringing into your worldview that you didn't have before. This right here is their expectations in all of this. So, fourth thing is kind of how it all comes together. Um, it can read a little bit harsh, and I'm not trying to come down on anybody when I'm putting this up here, but it's very real because this is what plagiarism is considered. The fourth and the final part of all of this is your future, you as a scholar, as a student. When you plagiarize on an assignment, right, you're no longer honored as a scholar, as a member of that scholar community that we've been talking about. It pretty much ends right there. If you're reported for plagiarism and you have to go through a process and stuff like that, you're not really honored as a scholar anymore. You're labeled as a thief. And again, I'm not trying to be harsh with those words that I put in here, but it is the reality of how serious plagiarism is and how people consider it to be um, an act of thievery, right? Because it's taking somebody else's information or thoughts and products and stuff, and you're not giving credit. So I wanted to put those down as just kind of again, helping us to think about why does this matter? Keep that frame of reference in mind of the scholar community, your role, your responsibilities. You're a member, you're an active member. This is where the importance comes in. So, I also wanted to just quickly point out you're most of us are probably aware of these things, but there might be a couple that you're not aware of. These are consequences of plagiarism. These are real life things that could happen at school and outside of school if somebody were to plagiarize. This first part, the first list is just really focused on school stuff. So I think this one we know students do get expelled from their university for plagiarizing, right? Depending on the severity and the specifics and all that kind of stuff. Loss of financial aid could be a very real consequence of doing that, which is a serious thing. And then also, if expulsion is not, the final decision in the process with leaders and other individuals, this could be something else. It could be, it'll depend on the circumstance, but something that could happen is on your transcript as a student, whenever you're done with your degree and all that kind of stuff at the university, there potentially could be a note on your transcript that tells whoever's looking at it that at some point you face disciplinary action for plagiarizing. And as we know, as adults, working adults, and people who at some point you already have had some educational experience, employers see that. And if you want to go to grad school or something like that, the schools are going to see that as well because you have to turn in your transcripts. So that's something to keep in mind. It kind of follows you into anything else that you do in life. These on this side, these are more so related to the workplace. There are consequences there as well. So you could be reprimanded at work. Because side note, people plagiarize at school, right, with schoolwork and things, but also people do it in their jobs, and it could be a really bad situation. So, this is just related to work. Could be reprimanded, or people could take it further if they choose to, and they could fire you from your job, right? And then this is the third one to also think about that can be very, very serious and could have some financial consequences associated with it. Legal action could be taken against you, depending on the severity and the circumstances, of course. But that's a very real thing. You might see news stories about that sometimes here and there, but legal action is a very real possibility with this. So these are consequences just to be aware of if there's some that you didn't know about. Just wanted to post those because I don't think everybody thinks about some of those outside things related. All right. Now, these next couple of sections are the kind of meat of the presentation. So let's talk about how to avoid plagiarism. There's a few different things to go with that in terms of, okay, so I understand the why behind it, the importance behind it, some consequences that could be faced. The first thing to understand when we talk about what are the steps that you can take to avoid and just make sure that this is never something that you have to deal with, understand when credit should be given. Let's do that one first, and I'll get to some other ones. So the first side over here, we're going to focus on when do you need to give credit on a paper, a video, whatever it is, versus when do you not really need to give credit. This one's pretty straightforward as well. So when you do need to give credit are in these circumstances. Words or ideas that are presented in a publication, a website, if there's something from a movie or a TV show that you want to use in your paper or presentation, those count as well, not just physical products. Um, that needs to be credited. Observations, thoughts, reasoning, basically any personal thoughts that somebody can share with you, whether it's written or spoken, those need to be credited as well because it comes from directly from somebody else, right? If they're not your own, we have to give credit. And this is the third one. This is related to media. So if there's any, especially if it's a subject area that may be like math or engineering or those where you're going to use these a little bit more, charts, diagrams, graphs, any kind of illustrations, you have to give credit to those, as well as videos, pictures that you want to use, all that kind of stuff. Those, and I think most of us already practice this, right? Those are the areas where you need to give credit to whoever produced these things, right? So that's the straightforward of when you do need it. There's also times when you don't actually need it, just to make sure that we're all clear on these aspects. There's some things where you don't have to give credit, just so you don't feel like I never want to scare people when talking about plagiarism. It's serious, but we want to make sure that we don't make people nervous about I have to document every little thing. No, there's some things where you don't need it. So, and it's essentially all of your own stuff. So, accounts of your own experience. If you're writing a paper and the topic area that your professor gave was give a personal example of you encountering some phenomenon, related to your course. And you're sharing just literally a real example from your own life or your family or something like that. you don't have to credit anything, right? That's just something that you went through that's pertaining to you. You could write it there and it's good as it is. That's just your own experience. Related to that are your own thoughts, reasoning, observations, which we expect you to put in your papers and your presentations. Those things are yours, right? They come from you. You don't need to figure out how do I credit my own self. It's just, it's coming from you. And you would state that in your writing, you know, my perception of this or my thoughts on this, right? For certain classes, especially if you're in the science related majors, if you do lab work, those are, you don't need to credit it. That's your work and you're talking about your results of something, you're explaining it. They don't need to have that. This one is where sometimes this last one is common knowledge. It can get a little tricky, um, but I put the definition down here just to make it more clear as to what that means. So, common knowledge is, I mean, it sounds self-explanatory, but it can get, um, the weeds of it can get a little tricky. So, it's information that most people know already. That's where it kind of gets a little iffy because it's like, that can sound like everything or a lot of things, but these are facts and information such as a really basic one is the sky is blue. People know that the sky is blue, right? We don't need to go find a book, a science book that talks about the specific nature of why the molecules make the sky blue, and we don't need to do all of that. That's common knowledge, right? I just gave a really basic example, but that's literally what's meant by the phrase. So that kind of stuff you don't need to. If it's a fact like um President Obama was born in whatever year that he was born. I don't know it right now off the top of my head, but he was born in whatever year, that's common knowledge. Have to you don't have to cite that because that's the year that he's born. Now, if you're taking other information from a biography about Obama, then you have to cite that biography book, but not like the year that he's born or his height or something like that. That's common knowledge. That's what that means. We can find that information. If you go look them up on Wikipedia, they have people's like age and their height and their year that they're born, their hometown. Like that's commonly found. It's not actually somebody's personal thoughts, right? So just to kind of break that down, these things you don't need to. That's just what it is. Okay. Now, this is the main thing that I want to really focus on because I've been teaching for a little while. I see students kind of mix these things up. This is still on the part of how do we avoid plagiarism? How do we make sure that we don't accidentally do it when we're writing and doing our presentations? These are the three things I want to talk about for right now. Quoting, paraphrasing, and summarizing. I'm going to focus mostly on the paraphrasing, and I'll show you a couple of examples, but this right here is where I see students trip up on how do you do it the right way? Okay, so I want to make sure I could go over it real quick with you all. Quotations is out of the three, I think the most oh, I shouldn't say that. Probably the easiest one to do out of the three, because all you're doing, and I'm sure you all have used quotes in your writing, you're just taking literally the exact words from a book or a magazine or something like that. You're quoting the exact source that you're using. So you're not changing anything. It stays the same. But I wanted to put these down here. You don't have to read through all of it, but these are some guidelines more so of when you're using these three things. For quotes in your papers and stuff, they should work as evidence of your thoughts, of your analysis, of how you're approaching a topic matter, how you're answering a question. They're meant to help you provide some evidence or some support of what you're saying. That's why we use quotes. I like to just point that out because sometimes it can get a little confusing of when do I do one versus the other? Quotes, they're meant to support what you're saying. When you're doing it, when you're using these in your writing and stuff like that, look for a passage from the book or the magazine or whatever that speaks most strongly to the point that you're trying to make, and you're going to be able to identify when should I use it, when should I not use it. And then this is just something else to go with it. Any quotes that you can find from people who are well known or respected, a prominent scientist or something like that, those are valued too. I put all that there because just as a quick add, when you're using quotes, it should be minimal. I just want to, as a prof this is the professor side of me speaking. When you're using quotes, there should be minimal, few of them. So I put those down there for that reason also. Um, there's a there is a way to approach it properly when you're using quotations. The majority of your writing should be this next one, paraphrasing. This is, I think, the one people get tripped up more. So when you're paraphrasing, this is what you want to rely on a lot more than the quotes, right? Um, Paraphrasing should be done, and as a more basic definition, if you're not familiar with it, it's you have some kind of information that you're looking at in an article or a book, and you want to use that, but you're wording it differently from what's there. You're putting your own spin on it, your own words into it. So when do you do this typically? When you don't need a direct quote, the first one, when you don't need that, right? Or if the language that you're looking at in your article or something is just kind of difficult in a sense where it's got a lot of strange words or really complex words or something where you feel like the reader is not really going to understand what you're saying because it may just be very specific to a topic area, you can do paraphrasing to kind of break the stuff down a little bit more. The key is when you're paraphrasing for your assignments, you want to make sure that it resembles the original thing you're looking at, but only in the points that you're making. Those shouldn't really deviate because your goal is that you're explaining or you're showing, I read this from an expert in whatever field. I'm just telling you what the main points are that they shared as an expert. And now I'm going to add in what my thoughts and viewpoints and stuff are. It should be similar in the points that are made, not in other things like length, style, the structure. It should be different because otherwise, you really might as well just quote if it's going to be very similar, right? And we'll show you some examples so it makes more sense. And then summarizing is the last one. Um, Not done as much, but these two the most out of the three. Um, the difference really with summarizing is a paraphrase is you're paraphrasing a small part of a piece of writing or media or something. Summarizing is a really big part. So you could summarize an entire article at once or an entire book chapter or something like that. Paraphrasing, you're not going to paraphrase an entire article. It's going to be way too much. You can't do all of that in one sitting, and you shouldn't be because that's not appropriate. Um, Summarize, yes, you will not paraphrase an entire book chapter. That's way too much information. So that's really just the difference between the two, to just break that down. The generalizations that you're making about that article or a couple of chapters of the book that you thought were really important, they come from your notes and stuff like that. It's just main ideas that you've identified that are important. You can summarize what that looks like, okay? So those are kind of an explanation of these three things that I hope is helpful in understanding what it is and when do I actually use it. All right. So now I want to do some examples. Okay. So the examples help to kind of solidify everything because I know I just shared a whole lot of stuff with y'all. The examples are meant to help you see what does this actually look like. This is the original. I took it from an article. I'll share some resources later, but this is going to be how to quote properly, which is also really straightforward, right? Um, I'll show you the acceptable part. So this is a good example. This is what it should look like if you're quoting the right way in your writing. So this is the original. This is like from the book. Let's just say I think it actually is. I've not read it, but it's a book that this is coming from. This is what the student, they're doing their assignment. They saw this and they said, I think I want to use that for my paper. That's a really good point that Diamond is the author. Diamond made this really excellent point. I want to use it in my paper. If this is what it says, it's talking about technology, the importance of an invention's diffusion. We don't need to go into the details of what it's saying per se. Invention. With the quotation, it's so straightforward. I'm just going to go down here to the actual one. They literally quote this piece of this that they want, which is that first sentence. If you're noticing, it's just the first sentence of that block up here. And that's what they wanted to include. Later on, after this sentence, they're going to talk about why they chose that. But this is how you quote properly. They gave a credit to the author of this writing, and there's the page number that it came from, right? Really straightforward. And like I said, I know we're all pretty much familiar with that, but just to show you still a good example. This is literally it. All of this is word for word the same thing. They didn't change anything here. Nothing has changed. It's just a literal quote from that block of text. Okay. Now, let me show you a good paraphrase example. This is the one I think we should focus on a little bit more. So I am going to read this one because this, like I said, this is where people get tripped up a little bit on. So this is an original block of text. It says, anyone who lives in a popular tourist city or town soon becomes aware of the fact that it's not only the tourists who experience culture shock at the behavior and beliefs of natives, but also the natives who experience culture shock at the unusual habits of tourists. Now, we don't need to worry about what class this is for and what in the topic area. I know it's very random, but the content of it is is the reason I read it. So now let's look at somebody who, saw this and they wanted to paraphrase for their paper. What was said in that original piece of writing? The author is the original author is Adrian Fernham. So this student, they did it properly. This is what they wrote for the paraphrase. And you'll see the similarities in the content, right? But they're not putting the exact same words. So they said Adrian Fernham shows us the flip side of the conventional travel perspective in his article, Tourism and Culture Shock. So now we know the name of the article and the author. After reviewing the psychological literature on the effects of travel on tourists, he considers the experience of people who are subjected to tourism. And there's a quote, not a quote, a citation. Fernham argues that people who live in tourist areas experience the same kind of culture shock that tourists do. Tourists and natives are equally strange to one another. Okay. So again, we don't need to know all the class details of what this comes from, and we don't have to read the book to know and see the similarities between these two, right? He's rehashing what was said here about the tourist city and the culture shock. The natives, the tourists, both of them experiencing culture shock with each other, essentially, is what this is saying, right? And the student inserted their own thoughts, right? You notice even here it says, after reviewing the psychological literature on this is the topic area. He considers this is what the author, did. Frenham argues that people who live, and so I just want to point out certain things in here. This is how you paraphrase something properly. They gave credit to the author, the name of the book or wherever this came from. There's an actual citation in there. And they used some of the same words, which is fine. Culture shock is the same thing that's up there. The natives, the tourists, all of that. But you see where the student has inserted their thoughts and their analysis. They're starting to get into that. And then I'm sure later in their paper, they broke down, some more details of what they thought related to travel stuff that this clearly is talking about. So this is a good example. I want us to just be able to take that in as to when I'm writing, because I get that question a lot from students. That's a common question that people sometimes struggle with. The more you practice doing it, the better you get. I promise that is the answer to paraphrasing. You have to practice it. You have to think about why does this even stand out to me? Why is it important? And what do I want to say about it? And that's a good example of how to do it. Okay. All right. I didn't put an example of summary because it's way too long. I want to do this real quick. This is like a quick game, even though we are virtual. If you're watching from home, you can pause it on here and kind of play along. So I want you to read this, just how we did with the examples. It's going to work the same way. This is a piece of original writing from an article, and I'm going to have two choices down here, and I want you to see which one is correct based on your own thoughts of which one's paraphrased correctly. I'm sorry, which one's paraphrased the right way. So I guess I can read this one real quick. Again, you don't need to know the details of the science. You don't have to be a scientist to understand like all this stuff. But let me just read it real quick. Epistemic bubbles can easily form accidentally, but the most plausible explanation for the particular features of echo chambers is something more malicious. Echo chambers are excellent tools to maintain, reinforce, and expand power through epistemic control. Thus, it's likely, though not necessary, that echo chambers are set up intentionally, or at least maintained for this functionality. That's the author's last name, and that's when it's written. So we'll take a few minutes. These are two choices that you have, A or B. It's one or the other. You think about it. If you're watching from home, you can pause it, think about it. I'm not going to put the answer up on the screen so you can have a chance to do that. But it's going to be one of these. If you're looking at that original block of text, I want you to think about which one of these is paraphrased correctly and which one is not. There's a wrong one out of these choices. Okay. I won't read those two because it'll take too long, but I'll wait a couple seconds. They're both talking about the same thing, but one is not really done very well, and the other one is pretty decent. I know there's quite a bit to read, so it takes a minute. But if you are watching from it, you can unpause it. I will, for the sake of time, go through. If any of you live, if you looked at it or were working on it, A is the wrong one. That's the one you don't want to do. A is incorrect. Don't do that one. Scratch it out. B is the right answer. B is the one that's paraphrased the right way. This is how you want to approach it. If that were the thing that you're looking at in an article, this is how you want to look at it. Why is A incorrect? Um, this is one of the obvious examples. They didn't quote or they didn't cite the author. There's no, citation of where did this come from. They just kept it. Um, they did kind of change the sentences around, right? As you typically do when you're paraphrasing, but it's still just pretty much rehashing what's up here, but they don't really give their own thoughts and stuff like that. This one, even the way it starts is much better. According to Win 2020, that's the author, echo chambers and epistemic bubbles have different origins. Nguyen argues that while epistemic bubbles can be created organically, it's more likely that echo chambers will, all of this, I'm not going to read through all of that, but um, those are, it's slight, but that is real. This one could be considered plagiarism because they just put it there and there's no references to where that came from. Didn't really change a whole lot of stuff around with the writing. It's quite similar to this one. But here, this one's at least showing some analysis or some thought process behind what's going on. And in the rest of their writing, they would give some more detail. So I wanted to just do that as a quick insertion of an activity. All right. So these last few minutes, this is the last section. We're almost there. Thank y'all for hanging in. I know it's a lot of stuff I'm throwing at you, but it's all important. You can watch the recording over again if you need to. This is the last section, I promise. This is the AI stuff. I know y'all were trying to see where's that. The AI stuff is here. Okay. I want to begin first with Loyola's AI policy. We do have one. The university has its own AI policy written out. I will try to get you all a link to that in our resource page or student resource page. It's not actually very long. You don't, I'm not gonna put the whole thing up here, of course. There is a section right in the middle of it that's for students. So I would encourage you to look at that. But for the sake of time and to help you all, I did put that information down here. So, number one, that in reference to students, because I have something else entirely for faculty and stuff. AI use in coursework. This is what the university policy has. So you can, as a student, you can use AI tools, whichever is your preference out of the many that exist, um, for these purposes. Ideation, research assistance, if you need to translate something. Tutoring purposes is kind of broad, but you can ask the AI to help you break down a topic area, or if there's a like a vocabulary word that is really complex and you don't understand it that you're looking at in your textbook or something, you can ask the AI to, hey, like, can you break down what this word means? Because I don't understand it. Stuff like that, the university does permit that. Okay, so that's the first thing to note for your coursework. The second one, this is what they have directly in the policy that's prohibited. This is what you should not be using AI for in your courses. Um, you cannot use them to engage in academically dishonest practices. So that does include, it says including but not limited to submitting work that was generated by AI. And that does include not just, a paragraph or something. That's also if you use it to create like a chart and you're going to put that chart into your paper or a graph of some information, some data or something that you're going to insert, like those different things count. If you don't cite in your paper or your presentation that you used an AI tool to generate that product, that's where you get in trouble. That's where it's prohibited. You're not allowed to do that. So those are the two main, parts related to students in our policy for the university. I just wanted to make sure I share that information with you. So this is what they consider anything academically dishonest. If you're not telling the professor, I use an AI tool to generate this information, you could face some consequences from that. So this last part, just when in doubt, because I know it can still be a little confusing as to specifically um, what you can do with it, check the syllabus. I say that because the policy itself, it does give leeway to the professor to kind of determine, yes, I do want my students to use it, or no, I don't. So I'd also want to make that clear. Your professor, while the university allows the use of tools, and number one, number three, it really actually depends on your specific professor and the class. So I do encourage you in each new class that you have, really look at the syllabus. It's typically at the end of the syllabus document. They will tell you in a section, the professor, yes, you can use it or no, you can't. If they say no for that class, they are allowed to do that. I just want to share that part with you all. They're allowed to say no if they decide as a professor. So check the syllabus. If you're in doubt, if you're still confused on, something for a particular class, it's up to their discretion. So let's keep that in mind as well. Okay. So that's the university. Now, I also want to share this information. When it comes to AI, um, these these things are related to plagiarism as well. Using AI to find resources. As I said before, I've been teaching for a while. I see this issue a lot. much more than I would like to. It hurts my heart when I see it. So I definitely wanted to put this up here and share with you all. You all may have seen this before with classmates or something. Um, if you this is one of the most common usages of AI, so that's why I put it up here. You can use it to find resources. Would I advise it? No, I would not. This is the reasons why we're up here. So the results. Be mindful that you get from using AI to find resources. Be very, very, very mindful of any results that an AI tool gives you if you ask it to find articles on blank, or can you locate a book that's on this history topic or something, psychology class, history class, whatever it is. If you use a tool to do that, that's up to you. I just encourage you to be very mindful of the results that it spits back at you. Okay. Why do I say that? This in the middle. This is really big. If you're not aware of what these are, hallucinations, this is a quick breakdown. Um, AI hallucinations, please understand what these are because students get into a lot of trouble. Even outside of academia in the work world, this is a real thing as well. AI, as advanced as it is, it's continually getting better and able to do more and more, you know, things. It still has some issues, no matter which one, from Google, from Apple, from whoever, all of them, the big platforms, they still have issues. This is one of them. Hallucinations. This is the actual term. I didn't make that up. It sounds funny because it's not a person. People hallucinate, but this is the actual term, AI hallucinations. If you've not heard it before, this is a good definition. I found it from University of Illinois. This is real straightforward. I like this definition because it just tells you literally everything that it does. AI hallucinations, if you're not familiar, they take place when a generative AI tool it produces incorrect, misleading, or simply non-existent information. That's very critical to be aware of this. And those are the key words. Incorrect, misleading. Some of it might be kind of right, but it's misleading. Or simply non-existent. I've seen this far too many times as a professor. Um, if you I'll show you an example. It's going to make more sense. If you use an AI tool to find something for you, it's very likely, just being honest, it may give you something that does not actually exist. And that is where the students get in trouble for plagiarizing because you can't do that. It just doesn't work when you're writing your papers and doing your presentations and all that stuff. This is just a real quick why, like from the science technology side of things, LLMs. Large language models, they're the ones doing all that work. They're trained to find patterns within data sets. That's how they work. I've done a little bit of work on that side, so I have some understanding of that. This is the general big picture. There's a lot of details with it that we don't need to go into. But this is in a general sense. They're trained on patterns on data sets, really, really big data sets. Y'all probably know that part already. The patterns that they come across and that people select for them to focus on they can start to predict words and generate new content. They can generate their own, which is on the previous slide in the policy where it said if you don't cite that you got something from an AI tool, that's a problem because they actually generate their own content. If you're not aware of that, this is how advanced they are. They can create brand new content. So that's why you have to cite an AI tool, as crazy as it sounds. But sometimes that stuff is not correct. Sometimes it is misleading, incorrect, or non-existent. Okay? So that's really, really important. You could get into big trouble if this is something that you're not paying attention to. Let's do a quick example of what I mean by this. This right here, um, this is a citation. It's APA format. You can test yourself on APA format if you want. This is from an actual student. This is not a Loyola student, so no worries about that. There's no identifiers. I received this as a professor when I was grading, not Loyola. Okay, this is not Loyola associated, but this was submitted to me. Okay, now look at it. Just take a look at it for a second. You don't have to know all the details about APA format. That's fine. But if you are familiar with it, it looks pretty good, right? If I see this on a paper, they've got the author names in the proper place, its structure is perfect, the year, and this is the title of the article, right? Faith-based organizations, employee engagement. Cool. So this is the topic area, employee engagement. This is the journal, you know. You always have to put the journal name of the article. Looks good. Journal of Healthcare Management. Okay, sounds right. There's no typos. The only issue really, if you know your APA stuff, this is supposed to be italicized, and they didn't do that, but hey, that's small. Um, this is the issue and all that. Page numbers, boom. Looking at that, doesn't look like there's anything wrong, right? There's no typos. All they missed is the italicized words. They've got the article, the journal, the page numbers. Everybody's name is up there. Looks pretty good, right? Okay, let me show you something real quick. I'm gonna exit out of here. All right, keep that information in mind. Let me show you this. This is the journal, the same one. Remember, Journal of Healthcare Management? I went to the website because I want to know. And I do this just because I'm always curious about stuff. I want to know, okay, a little bit more where this came from because I'm not really familiar with this journal. So I might want to read some more articles from it. That's the name of it. This is the actual website. They said it was 67. I think the year, sorry, hang on. I was supposed to put the year on there.
2022.
Okay, there we go. Thank you. I was supposed to write down the year so I could remember. Thank you. See, y'all are so helpful. 67 was the volume, right? And then issue number 3. Okay, so let's click on it. That's what was cited on the thing, right? So they've got the information for me. I did write down the title. So the title that they gave was, it said faith-based organizations. We don't even need to have the whole thing. Just remember the words faith-based organization. So I'm gonna scroll. La la la. They're telling me all the articles that are in this particular issue. All of them. They don't remove anything from the website. Okay, systematic, that's great. Hospital, I still don't see it. Pennsylvania, something. Well, no, I don't see it still. Medical complexity, no, that's not it. Nope. I don't see anything about faith-based organizations. Do y'all? Employee engagement, right? I don't see anything. That's the end of the page, right? Um, Let me double check. That was the name of the journal. This was the volume, 67, issue number 3, right? Year 2022. I just checked everything. This is all the articles. All journals that have a list of what's in there. I don't see it. So, why did I even show you that? Because if you're not careful and you ask it to, on your AI tool, can you bring me or show me an article about employee engagement? This is what the tool gave the student, okay? And the student turned this in to me, the professor. And this is what I found. And we just saw in real time on the website for Journal of Healthcare Management, this does not exist. Sorry. It's not real. This is a hallucination from an AI tool. I don't know which tool. I don't know if it's ChatGPT or something else. I don't know which one they used, but this is a hallucination. Real example. This is a few weeks ago I got this from a student, okay? I see it all the time. Way too much. It's a big no-no. You cannot do that. And unfortunately, they did not get a good grade because this doesn't exist. It's a hallucination. This is what it looks like. I just wanted to show you that, okay? So, this is the last part. Well, we've got a few more minutes. We talked about the importance of understanding the plagiarism stuff. What does it look? How do I make sure I avoid plagiarism? How do I make sure I paraphrase and do the quotes and do a summary, look at examples, and then we went over some of the AI stuff, right? And I showed you hallucinations and our policy for the university. This I want to end with. This is the last part. Using AI to write for you. Um, I don't recommend it. Okay. This is the final verdict. Like, don't do that. This is how you can avoid having some issues with plagiarism and using AI tools. AI tools are great, and we'll have a whole nother webinar on some things that you can do about things that you can do with AI tools as a student and use it to help you out. That's going to be later, okay? But please do not use it to write stuff for you, or if you're gonna ask it to find resources, like I just shared in the example, double check stuff. It's really, honestly, it's just better to do your own searching for articles because it really helps you as a student. I promise it'll really be worth it. And it's quite interesting. I always enjoyed doing that when I was in school. But if you're going to use a tool, double check. Allow AI tools to help you conduct some brainstorming if you need to. That's fine. It helps, right? It can point out stuff that you didn't know about or didn't think of. But don't allow it to complete your work for you. That's different. And that's what we want to avoid. You can avoid plagiarism by making sure that this is not taking place. Improper use of these different sophisticated AI tools, as wonderful as they are, they're not perfect. There's still always something to work out. There's still things that they're not capable of or that they just don't do properly. And that's just the reality of it, and that's fine. Um, but be mindful of how you use them. And that's a really quick way, easy way to just make sure that you don't have issues with plagiarism, in addition to the other stuff that I put. But yeah, I wanted to share all of that. I know that's a lot of information, so please feel free to rewind and rewatch and stuff like that. But those are some insights into plagiarism and AI and how do we use it. So there we go. That's the end.
That was so much useful information. And I love the inclusion of the hallucination because, you hear about it and you know that it's happening, but, you know, you see it. It's like,
Hmm.
yeah, wow.
Yes, way too much. So,
And I think the acknowledgement that this is not just an issue for students, but for people professionally as well, because I think that's where a lot of that is going to be a factor too. So
mhm.
thank you for so much wonderful, useful information.
Of course, absolutely. No problem at all. If you all have questions as you watch this and go through it, please feel free to reach out to me or to any of us, really. And again, like I said, I'll try to get some resources posted pretty soon so you all can have some more details I think are going to be helpful. But yeah, hope that was enjoyable, and I look forward to hearing from any of y'all if you do want to discuss a little bit more.
Wonderful. Thank you again.
No problem. Thanks, y'all.